Alright, so I'm going to be doing a full kind of deep dive here on the Instack Kinetic Blast character. I'm going to specifically be covering the Deadeye version and the Trickster version. There is a Warden version, I will not be covering that. But first I'll just start with, this is my character currently in the league. I will pull it up at the end just to show piece by piece the gear that I'm wearing and kind of like just give a small estimate of the price of what you could expect, or at least like just what the items are worth, and that will just be another piece of information just to show you know, how I got to these numbers. I'm gonna be honest, this full DPS being 1 billion, I don't know if I'm calculating it correctly. It's really hard to tell because I don't know how to actually implement like every single different blast that's hitting. So I put in 15 different hits per attack, which I think is reasonable. But again, like, I'm not perfect about this calculating the actual DPS through that method. But what I will say is it feels like that. This is the number that it feels like right now after making my wand upgrade today. So that's where I landed on that. I think it's fair, and I think if someone saw the gear, they could totally be like, yeah, this makes sense for it to be a billion DPS build with the Doriani stuff going on. In a regular league, it would be like 150 mil probably, but because of the Doriani tech, here we are. So yeah, there's my character. The Fizz max hit has gotten to a point where it's very comfortable. This character feels pretty tanky. The only issue that I run into frequently is recovery when I'm not hitting anything, because I don't have Overleash as a Deadeye, and so I'm kind of stuck without being able to regen, and that's one of the downsides of playing Deadeye, but it's okay. So here, I'll just kind of go over like the different sections that I'm going to go do here and what I'm going to cover, what I won't cover. First, I'm going to start with what I won't cover, just to get it out of the way. I'm not going to demonstrate my passive tree or other passive trees because I genuinely think that it's somewhat versatile. You can make changes to the passive tree. It depends on what kind of, it depends if you're Trickster, it depends on if you're Deadeye, and it depends on like what level of gear you're at and so on. And so if you want to get examples of passive trees to use, just use PoE Ninja. Just look up Deadeyes or Tricksters, whichever you're playing, and click Kinetic Blast and see what they're doing with their trees, and you'll be able to put together what you think you need, and you'll be able to make those decisions yourself. It's really not very complicated. I also won't be covering the Headhunter Kinetic Blast because I am not playing it, and I actually don't think that character is... It doesn't need a deep dive. I think it's extremely straightforward how that build works. All you have to do is go look at a PoE Ninja and you'll be able to tell what to do, as most Headhunter builds are. I also won't be covering the Warden, not because I don't think it's good, it's because I literally just haven't tried it, and I don't think I will try it. At least not this league, because my thought process is that the Warden is sort of a single target damage solution when it comes to Kinetic Blast, and I've mentioned in the first like showcase overview of the build that the Doriani Merc setup is already alleviating like that entire issue. Single target is not an issue for this build, this league whatsoever. So I don't see any other particular reason to go for Warden, and I might be missing something. I might be wrong about that. I don't know. I just haven't looked into it much at all because I don't think I need to. I also just don't really like the Ascendancy. It's never appealed to me, but I will not cover the Animate Guardian simply because I haven't tried it, and I don't feel like I'm going to try it. It doesn't seem necessary. However, I know that it can give you crit immunity. Almost crit immunity, because your Animate Guardian has to be alive, and it also has to be near enemies. Those enemies won't be able to crit. And it also gives you the action speed can't be lowered below base value, which is like the Trickster and Juggernaut node. So that is very valuable. You won't be able to get, like, you can run petrification statues way easier. You know, it's just generally a really good thing. You don't have to worry about freeze immunity, which, you know, who really cares? But either way, it's definitely something to consider and something to look into, but it's not fleshed out enough yet from what I've seen. And I also really do appreciate running Steel Skin for these like pseudo bleed immunity. So I just keep my, because that's what you would replace. You would replace automation or cast when damage taken, and I don't want to replace that. I also won't be covering any alternate merc setups. And I want to say this now, that there is very well going to be mercenaries out there that are better than my setup. The setup that I'm going to provide for you in this video is the setup that I use and the setup that I find really comfortable for me and that I don't feel like I need to change it. The only downside I've had so far is that I feel like I could probably set him up to die a lot less, but not really so concerned with that anymore. Okay, so what I will cover, first I'm going to talk about the Ascendancies, because I'm going to talk about 2 here, Deadeye Trickster. I'm going to cover each one and what their strengths are. Then I'm going to go over the gems, what things you have linked to your gems, and, you know, just which ones are good to have, and which ones you can replace at certain points, yada, you know, yada yada. Then I'm going to go through the gearing, slot by slot, give a small amount of commentary on how you can acquire the gear through crafting or trading, and which I think is a better option for you. And what's like the better decision, you know, between buying or crafting it. Then I'll cover my mercenary. And then I'll talk about the aspirational upgrades, the stuff that you're trying to really get to get this build like truly online. I'm going to cover the realistic things and the chase things. There's only a few things to go over there, but yeah. And then at the end, I'm just going to kind of like talk about like upcoming leagues in the future, what I would expect to happen to this build after its current state, going into a new patch, especially if mercenaries aren't going to exist, and I don't think they're going to exist. I think it's just fundamentally a little bit too, I mean, overpowered to be quite honest, to have them. But there's a chance, you know, there's a chance the Doriani thing could stick and go core, but I don't think so. So that's why I have this section here, because I think that's worth talking about a little bit. And just here's a few disclaimers before I get right into it. You should not play this build on a low budget, and when I say low budget, I mean less than 200 divines-ish. It's just, you're just not going to have fun. This is a high budget build, and it's basically impossible to make a low budget build. Like, obviously you can play a low budget version of it, but there's basically no reason to. You're playing a Deadeye, just go farm with element. If you're playing a Deadeye, just go farm with Elemental Head of Spectrum until you have enough currency to do this. If you're playing a Trickster, go farm with Smite, and you can get all the currency you need to start this build up. This is also not new player friendly, and the reason for that is mostly, there's a couple of reasons that I could say, but the most important one is that if you actually want to be able to make changes and upgrade the character, you need to have a fundamental understanding of the character, and that's just inherently anti-new player, and so you're going to end up getting stuck a lot, and you're going to find yourself trying really hard to find information, and you'll probably just end up back at this video, which while I am trying to deep dive as much as possible, there's just not really any way that I can cater to new players, because I'm not even entirely sure how I would. So you're welcome to try it as a new player. You know, I think it's also really fun to tackle things that you don't understand like this, and it might be a good learning experience, but you are going to struggle, and you're going to have a lot of questions, and there probably won't be answers to all the questions you have out there. The prices of all the items in this video is obviously priced as if it were the prices I saw today, putting in the items, so, you know, take the prices with a small grain of salt, although I will mention every time I look at a price whether I expect it to go up or down based on previous leagues, and I do think I have a good idea of the market for these items. And lastly, I have not played all versions of Kinetic Blast. In particular, there's 2 that come to mind. There's the Warden. I have not played that, which I don't think I need to understand what it is, but again, I could be wrong. And the other one I haven't played is the new one that's come out, the Champion Kinetic Blast, because that one's a sort of a more budget friendly. So I will say that if you are on a budget and you really just want to play Kinetic Blast, if that's like the main reason you're here, then go watch Big Duck's YouTube channel guide on Kinetic Blast Champion. It does look very solid. It does look, it's pretty easy to get online, and I definitely would endorse that build. It looks quite good. Okay, so let's hop into the Ascendancies. So these are the things I think are the most important differences between the two. I'll start with Trickster. One of the biggest strengths about Trickster is Trickster scales defense extremely efficiently through its Ascendancy. You get really high amounts of evasion and armor from your Escape Artist node. Granted, got a small nerf this league, but it's still extremely good in value, which scales your Ghost Shrouds, really adding on to another defensive layer there, and you can get spell suppress capped a lot better because you're incentivized and I guess, yeah, just incentivized to wear a necrotic armor as your body armor with the evasion and energy shield. That means that your body armor can roll spell suppression. You can get up to like 24%, I think, ish, something like that, on your body armor. And you can also use like ES evasion hybrid pieces of gear elsewhere as well. Your gloves, your boots, your helmet, and something that's nice about that is there's a spell suppression mastery in the game on the evasion wheels that gives you 15% extra spell suppression if you are wearing, like, I think it's boots, gloves, body, helmet, evasion on it, and you can get like 15% spell suppression. So it's just like ultimately you can actually aim to get spell suppression. I feel like it's actually kind of impossible to fit into the Deadeye because you're really not trying to get any evasion gear because you just don't take advantage of that escape artist, which is what really makes that worth it. So either way, like yeah, spell suppression on Trickster, basically no spell suppression on Deadeye. Your recovery is phenomenal as a Trickster. That's like one of its specialties is recovery. Its overleech is insanely strong, and that's like the thing that the Deadeye is missing the most is your recovery because you can't overleech. So it's just really nice. It's like constant ES regen. That's like 4,000 a second or something. It's incredible. You do get a slightly better starting position on the skill tree. This just makes you, it gives you, you have to use less points to get to the places you want to go. It's just slightly more efficient, and you also don't even have to pick up any dexterity nodes on the way. You can literally just pick all the intelligence nodes. That's another thing. And it also makes it easier to throw in a third cluster, because the place you'd want to throw in a third cluster is all the way on the left side of the tree, near where the Marauder starts, in that area. And so third cluster setups are really nice when you actually can make that work, and the Trickster makes that work a lot easier. So that is something to consider. And fourth, last here, but definitely not least, the Trickster can take advantage, because of Overleech, of all of the wild leeching modifiers in the game, and these are very powerful. I have a few listed here. There's Fuel the Fight and Feed the Fury, which is part of Cluster Jewels for attacks. I think it rolls on like any kind of attack, whether it's attack damage with shields or dual wielding or swords or whatever, but you'd probably be using the shield one. You'll get much more benefit out of those than you would on a different Ascendancy, because you're always leeching, so you're always getting that 20% damage bonus and that 15% attack speed bonus from those two. Gladiator's Perseverance is a really, really good amulet anoint. It's too far away for us to actually grab that efficiently. It's not worth it. You just get 40% increased attack damage and 10% increased attack speed because you are always on full life, being CI. So that node is extremely valuable. I almost always take it when I'm playing Trickster. Also, Soul Drinker gives you an inherent 2% of damage leeches energy shield, which basically makes it so that you don't need to get leech anywhere else. That amount of leech is quite incredible. And it also gives you 20% attack speed and cast speed while leeching. And then at the bottom here, this is a benchcraft modifier that you can throw on gloves, and I think probably jewelry, I think, is the other one, minus the belt. So this is just a really nice thing that Deadeye really can't use. So on the other side, the Deadeye is specialized in mapping. It gets online a lot faster with mapping, because you have Tailwind, which is just like crazy action speed at all times. You're just way faster by that, and you also have extra projectiles naturally from your Ascendancy, which means you get better coverage and better damage scaling essentially for free, which is the next point. It scales damage slightly better because it has that 2 extra projectiles, and this gives you more coverage and single target shotgun damage. And it's very cool because that it's such an incredible amount of scaling damage that it really like frees up. It gives you some freedom on your gearing. Like you can make up for some other issues on your character a lot easier when you have this like just free damage thing. So it's very efficient. If you're the kind of person that likes to use Barrage for single target, I personally hate it, but I know there's a lot of people doing it. Deadeye also benefits there because you get no spread on your barrages, so they just more reliably all hit your enemy. So that's just nice if you like that. And then it's just comes online faster than a Trickster does. It gets to that zoomy point that in that gameplay loop that everyone loves about the Wanders on a lower budget because of the same thing I was discussing earlier, but also because you get 75% mark effect, which is incredible for sniper mark DPS increasing. And those are the big differences. As you can tell, they're not like the biggest differences. You can kind of just say like the Trickster is better for defense and bossing, and because of its recovery, especially like the bossing thing with recovery, it feels so good because there's so many phases, right? Like think of the Exarch fight. Like on Trickster, you can actually take some of those balls, plus you have spell suppression, and like you're still going to be recovering. But on Deadeye, like you're kind of just fucked. So, yeah, again, like the differences aren't massive. And then the Deadeye would just be like a better, faster mapper, which generally people are picking this build to map fast. So I would say Deadeye is probably the favorite among people, even especially with Headhunter, but with Maidblood as well. So now I'll talk about the gems. There's not too much to talk about here, but still it's worth going over. So I'll just briefly mention, or kind of like pseudo-explain here what Kinetic Blast is actually doing. Every projectile the Kinetic Blast shoots will create 5 explosions. It says 4 here, but it's 5 when you have the gem levels. Or no, it's when you have the quality on it. You get 5. And any increases in reductions to spell damage apply to attack damage at 200% value, which is extremely strong for scaling, and it's why our cluster jewels are spell damage cluster jewels, because that is basically 10% cluster spell damage is 20 for this skill, and you put 35 effect on it, and it's even better. It's like 26 or something. So what you do is you link Sacred Wisps, because Sacred Wisps just basically spawns 2 guys that will just, like, as you attack stuff, they'll just spawn like these 2 guys that also attack stuff. It's like Mirage Archer for support for wands. LA damage with attacks, obviously, and you want to get this awakened as soon as possible for elemental reflect immunity. Volatility, because this is a lightning build that scales really, what do you call it? The range of damage is like very wide. You know, it's like 120 damage or 100,000 damage in between those 2 ranges. So volatility makes those ranges even bigger. And there's a mechanic on the Mercenary, which you're probably already aware of, but I'll still break down later that will explain why volatility is so completely disgustingly broken in these lightning builds. Fork is pretty much mandatory for clearing. And I also think it's pretty much mandatory for bossing, because the fork does actually spawn more projectiles that are doing even more damage, especially because you're hitting your tornado, which is also forking. So it's just, it genuinely adds like an insane amount of damage as well. And I suggest you get Awakened Fork as soon as possible. It gives you an additional fork, and it is very noticeable, and it feels, that's when the build truly starts to feel like it's the best mapping build in the entire game. And then you would obviously just like return projectiles, because it's just great. Even after nerfing, it's still just basically the best in slot for that. But if you acquire Nimbus, you would then replace return projectiles with increased crit multi, because you don't need to return them anymore. The ring does it for you, and so Nimbus becomes an extremely valuable upgrade. Something around like a 60% more damage, something like that, to like just 60% more damage for single target, because of those 2 changes you can make. You can also on Trickster use Energy Leech support, and so you basically just have to decide, do you want to replace return projectiles or Sacred Wisp for Energy Leech, because Energy Leech is extremely valuable and you should use it. I probably would personally replace the Wisps, because return proj just feels too good, and Sacred Wisp is, well, you know, my computer's not the best, so it kind of also makes my game lag, so there's a little bit of bias there, but either way, whatever, you can pick and choose which one you would replace. As for auras, these are the auras I use. They're not the only aura you can use. You can fit other things in if you want. Like if you're a Flesh and Stone enjoyer, and like maybe even Arctic Armor, like these kind of things, you can do that. I want to point out that I don't have haste on here, because the only reason I'm able to use haste, you'll see later, is because of my Mercenary having Wrath. So I'm just assuming you don't have the Mercenary that has Wrath. If you do, you can take Wrath off of yourself and put haste on. But if you have a kineticist with haste, then then you can put Wrath on. You get it. Wrath is just an insane amount of flat damage. It's just obvious, and it also scales off of a Watcher Eye mod that gives us either increased crit chance or increased lightning damage. It's up to you which one you want. They're kind of both equal in power. Discipline, obviously, you just get a bunch of energy shield. Just great stuff. And then Grace is just, evasion, because we're running Ghost Shrouds, and because we're instacking, there's an evasion and energy shield mastery that makes intelligence scale our dexterity by percentage instead of our evasion by percentage instead of it being dexterity scaling it. So it's just an insane amount of value. This Grace flat evasion turns into a lot just because of that. If you have like 2,000 intelligence, you're getting like so much evasion just from that one mastery node. It's a pretty ridiculous amount, and it makes Ghost Shrouds really strong. And most importantly, actually, between all of these auras, is the Spellslinger Tornado setup. And the reason that you use this is because it will spawn a tornado right next to you every time you attack, and that tornado is something that you can hit. And because you're hitting it, it's spawning more projectiles through Fork, and it's also causing more overlap damage on the boss. And once you've played the build enough where you're comfortable playing it, you can actually take the time to try to pay attention to when you're hitting the tornado, and you can actually notice the damage difference. It's kind of like if you've ever played Lightning Strike or Smite, where you can get double hits if you stand at just the right distance. It's a very similar concept. And then for the mark, we just use Sniper's Mark. This is a very classic setup that is on every projectile attacking build. Sniper's Mark with linked with Mark on hit. You want to try to get these 20 quality pretty quick because the quality on both of these is quite solid. Sniper's Mark, I think, is just more increased damage from proj hits, but that's actually more damage multiplier, not increased damage, because they're taking that much increased damage, and so it's scaling your damage by that amount. So whatever your final number is, it's going to go up 29% more with a max level Sniper Mark. So I think it goes to 34% if you get the quality, so it's just 5% more damage, and Mark on hit quality will also increase the effect of Sniper's Mark. And then you can run Enhance. I personally do. I think it's quite valuable. I just use level 3. I should probably buy a level 4 to be honest, but it just scales quality, makes those two things even better. So optional, of course. But then also I want to point out that Focal Point is the 75% increased mark of your effect of your marks, and it also causes you to take 25% less damage taken from them. Well, actually, no, it's from enemies around them, I suppose. Okay, so either way, it's a nice little defense thing. Then I have the automation / cast when damage taken. I personally run automation. I personally think Steel Skin is the only actual guard skill that makes sense. You can definitely choose cast when damage taken if you want, though. And you obviously link it with more duration. And you can throw Enhance on there too if you just want some more duration and cooldown recovery rate if you wanted to. I don't do that for this one, but you could. And I will mention now that the Animate Guardian stuff that has been running around a little bit right now because of the changes to Animate Guardian not losing its gear and stuff. Some people are setting up Animate Guardians and they're replacing this gem link with the Animate Guardian. So if you wanted to take that approach, if you found some Animate Guardian tech, this is the thing you would replace with it. As far as movement skills go, just use what you like, but I'm sure that everybody would basically agree that Shield Charge and Frostblink is just the best. So I would personally suggest Shield Charge. If you're for some reason dual wielding and you're not using a shield, then I would just use Flame Dash and not anything else. And then the miscellaneous gems here, I have Citadel of Power because you attack so fast that you use mana very quickly. So you end up getting pretty high in the stages pretty quickly. It's very quick at ramping, which will then cause anything inside of it to deal 19% less damage, and you'll also get added flat lightning damage, which is just, it's just nice. It's actually quite a bit too. And then I'm running Precision level 1 to take advantage of a Watcher's Eye mod. I have the 15% increased attack speed while affected by precision. This is not my jewel. Mine is the attack speed with precision, and then it also has increased lightning damage with Wrath. And one like that would run you 10 divine. So it's not too crazy, but very worth it. And then there's some alternatives here. Like I was saying earlier, you can use Arctic Armor, you can use Flesh and Stone. You can try the Animate Guardian tech. There's Summon Stone Golem just for increased global defenses. You could technically throw in Purity of Elements if you wanted to, especially before you have Mage Blood, so you need the element, the ailment immunity, and resistance is covered. You could open up a lot of slots in your gear if you wanted to. It's definitely an option. People definitely do it. And then the last thing, this is something probably nobody does, but for some reason, if your attack or mana cost is too high, for whatever reason, you could technically throw in a Clarity level 1 and get a -10 to mana cost while affected by Clarity, Watcher's Eye. Now into the probably most important part, and I think what people are probably mostly going to be watching this for. It is the gearing section, and I'm going to go through these in order of what I think is important. And when I say important and in order, I mean in terms of which one should be the best piece on your character. If you had a perfect scenario where you could choose each piece to be the better piece than the next, you would do it like this. Like all of these pieces of gear are mandatory. It's just a matter of how much money you're going to spend on each one. So, and also for all of the crafting methods that, which there's only, I'm only barely going to touch it, but you can use Blue Life Force, or you can do recombining, Jesus Christ, to craft all of this energy shield gear, which you probably already know. I mean, it's pretty safe, easy, well-known knowledge at this point, but yeah, so just, there you go. I prefer essences, so this is the most important piece. If you don't have this, you don't have a build. You need a wand that has added flat per 10 intelligence with increased spell damage per 16 intelligence, and then anything else you can get that just feels really good. And you have to remember spell damage applies to kinetic blast, so spell damage is a very useful thing to roll. And then you just, like, the most important stats past that point are just having attack speed and crit chance. So I will have a link to the crafting process in the description. It's actually not hard to craft. The only hard thing about it is the RNG of what mods you're going to get that aren't those two mods, because you can guarantee those two mods every time. And then if you wanted, you can clear the suffixes and just do multi-mod, like this one that I found on trade. Like this one's a really good example of a pretty medium budget wand. Like you'd spend like less than 10 divine to make this wand. I'll go into jewelry here because I think the jewelry is the most important pieces of the gear to have the best rolls on. And that's like across all jewelry. None of it seems to me to be more important than your like armor gear. So I think all of these jewelry pieces are more important than all of the armor. So when it comes to this, I think rings is the most important because of the fact that you can reflect. So if you have an insanely well-crafted ring, it's double the value, right? Because you can just Calandra's Touch it, which is a super cheap unique. I think it's like 6 divine right now. I will say this though, if you want to make this build, I think you should probably start buying these bases now, even if you don't have enough currency to actually put the character together. The ring in particular, I would buy it now because the price is going up, and it's going up rapidly because this build is picking up in popularity. So I suggest buy it now. And then yeah, you would just reflect whatever ring you have. Alternatively, you can just use the Nimbus on the other slot, which is going down to 36 divine right now. Incredible item for that price. It is very strange to me that it's gone down to that price. And the priority stats that you want on your crafted ring is intelligence, and this is very, you'll notice the priority stats are very similar across every piece of gear here. Intelligence always the most important. I'm probably not going to even mention that in the next one because, like, obviously, energy shield I consider to be more important than crit multi. I think other people tell you that crit multi is better because they just want more damage, but I personally think that if I can get energy shield, that's more value to me because defense is much harder to find on the build than damage. So yeah, then you do crit multi as the next one because it is kind of the best, aside from intelligence, the best damage scaling you can have on a ring. And then just like generic resistances, and then, you know, luxury would be LE with attacks. And then I personally would always craft with essences in this case. I basically craft all of my gear with essences when it comes to energy shield characters. And you can choose if you want to use Spite or Woe, either one. Like if you want the ES guaranteed, you use Woe. If you want the intelligence this way, then you do Spite. It also, also depending on the price, whichever one you're more comfortable with buying. And then I'll just also on a side note here, you can use a well-rolled helical ring, which is, it's the base that has increased effect on its suffixes. I think that's basically the best in slot ring, especially if you can get a mirrored one of it. Or you could also just find like a regular ring that's mirrored with a bunch of int on it. I don't think it's worth doing unless you get a ring with at least like 120 intelligence on it, and it also needs to not have no drawbacks to your damage, so it gets really expensive really quickly. And I kind of think it's not worth it. It's a very small margin upgrade for, again, like versus a really well crafted synthesized ring. So it just depends. If you have the budget, go for it, I guess. But all right, so the amulets next. Again, you just get a % intelligence base. I don't know that this price is going to go up much because it's been sitting at 1D for a long time. There's something about the amulets being more common, I assume, or something. Or maybe it's just because people are always wearing simplexes. But, obviously there's a stage before you can wear a simplex. It's kind of an expensive item. So I used a % int amulet for a very long time on the character. I think I was level 99 by the time I stopped using it and put on a simplex. Actually, no, I was already level 100, so I wore it for a long time. They're very they're very good. And again, you would just craft it with Essence of Spite, or again, if you wanted to use a woe, you could. I don't advise it on amulets though, because you can like craft % ES, and that's like kind of good enough. So obviously priority stats here: flat energy shield, increased energy shield resistances, and crit multi. I'd probably actually put crit multi above resistances. I think that I typed this wrong, but either way, it's like those are the 5 that you want there. So, and then obviously there's the simplex, but we'll talk about that later. And then obviously belt is up next. If you can't afford mage blood, which if I had to give perfect advice here on like realistically how you're going to have a good time with the character, equipping mage blood is one of those things. That being said though, I wore a synthesized belt until probably level 99 before I bought the mage blood. It was the first big purchase I made, and the belt did a lot for me. As a matter of fact, when I switched off of the belt and went to mage blood, I lost 2,000 energy shield, which I kind of made up for later by actually equipping items that were appropriate while wearing a mage blood. Like I opened up spaces on the gear so I could upgrade it for cheaper. Yeah, these are very cheap on the market. These ones are just like super value, and it's because almost all KB characters that can afford to wear a headhunter or a mage blood, they basically are. I can't stand headhunter because I just don't like the kind of content that it forces you into, and it also lags the hell out of my computer when KB is like truly going off. So yeah, these bases are always really cheap because not many people are using them, but that is really good. Because these things, getting an 18% increase in implicit with the attribute catalyst, like 18% is a very big number, and it will do a lot of heavy lifting for you. So yeah, it's super value, and again, you just use like Essence of Spite and stuff for the crafting, and you could reforge defense on this, but I really wouldn't advise that. I don't think that's worth it. But yeah, then obviously Mage Blood is just it's your chase belt. This is the one you want. Like, obviously, everyone knows that. Don't even need to talk about that. But I will say, Mage Blood price is going up, pretty slowly, but it is steadily going up. Probably because they're getting bought up because people probably they finally have currency to spend on them, something like that. Okay, so that's the jewelry. Now we'll talk about the armor, and I'm going to start with the shield. Because first of all, one of the absolute best options and one of the best shields that you can wear is the Atziri's Reflection. Like, even if you get Mage Blood, this shield is still incredible because it also frees up a Flask suffix because you're immune to curses. But I mean, look at the stats this item gives you, right? You get a really solid chunk of evasion, a really solid chunk of energy shield, a really big chunk of intelligence, up to 30% all elemental resistances, and you get increased effect of your curses, which does scale Sniper Mark. So this item is insanely value, and it's even better on Trickster. I would advise using this for a long time on Trickster. It's going to be really hard to replace it. 150 chaos for this item, unbelievable. I don't know what happened, but now it's so cheap. Like, it's been expensive in the last, like, 3 leagues. I don't know what happened, but take advantage while you can. This is the best possible budget item on this character. Like, in terms of saving a lot of money, this is the one. So, there you go. And then eventually I'll upgrade to a rare shield. The shield I have here is almost identical to the one I'm wearing. I just, instead of having suppressed fell damage, I have another double damage mod. But yeah, if you wanted to upgrade from Aziri's Reflection, you're looking at a shield that at least needs to be this good, basically. And, you know, I have the price here. It's 60D. That's about the right price. But it is a very worthwhile investment, because an extra 250 flat ES in this case is quite tremendous, and the double damage mods will do a lot more for you than the Reflection would have. So, and then you can see the priority stats are in Energy Shield as much as possible, of course, and then the 2 double damage mods, which you want to try to get one of them with a Veiled Orb. You just, prefixes can't be changed, Veiled Orb, and then you'll have a suffix to unveil, and you block something, and then, you know, hope you run into I think double damage while focus is the best one to get from the Veiled mod. The regular double damage one is kind of like not as good. It's like 6% or something versus like 20. And yeah, you can also, like, luxury rolls here is like getting plus to maximum resistances, and obviously you can just use resistances on it if your suffixes are open. So that's the most important piece of the armor to me, to have a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot of currency, but to have just established, because obviously you can buy this ring or shield, the Reflection, so this is a super easy one to get done, and I would advise getting this one done very quickly and buying the shield. Next is body armor, and this is, in the case of the Deadeye, a Twilight Regalia base, and in the case of the Trickster, it's a Necrotic Armor base. And it is extremely simple. You're just looking to craft tier 1 int and as much energy shield as possible. And then the 2 best implicits are less damage taken per int and increased aura effect. And there's not really much else to say here. It's very typical energy shield gear. The suffix you want to craft is percent increased attributes, of course. And there's really nothing else to say here. It's just a very typical base. Personally, the way I craft mine is I buy a fractured base that's like just below the best kind of fracture. So it's not like overly expensive base. And then I just like slam essences on it until something's like good enough, and I save a lot of money by doing that, and you should probably do that too. That's a trend for all of this gear. You'll notice if any screenshots I have, actually I don't think I have any screenshots of my actual gear in here, but they're almost always with a fracture, because I just buy the fractured stuff as early as possible and save a lot of money by doing that too. That's another thing I'll just say is, like, in the future, when it comes to crafting this stuff, like, you should get these bases like as soon as they exist in the league if you plan on playing this build, because they are so cheap at the start, because no one can afford to play this build, right? So, like, get ahead of it, buy the bases, craft it later. Helmet is an extremely valuable piece, particularly because of this energy shield mastery here. I'll just point that out now. 100% increased energy shield from equipped helmet, and that's base energy shield. So if you have a 513 ES helmet like this one here, you're going to end up with 1026 coming from your helmet, which is massive, especially on Trickster, where you're also getting evasion from your energy shield on your helmet. So it's pretty solid. And this is an example of a base that I would buy, is a fracture like this, where it's not tier 1, it's tier 2. But in reality, it's like the differences between the two is not worth the price difference between the two. So this is like what I would do. You can see this one's 20D. This is very worth it. This is a very, very solid item for 20D. You'll get a lot of value out of this. And I personally always use mana reservation of skills, because I just like to get it here. It just feels nice. And then reduce mana cost of attacks, just to make sure you've got a usable KB. You craft this just like everything else. It's very similar to all the other gear. Yeah, nothing much else to say there. Gloves are as simple as the last one. They're just, you're just again looking for an energy shield, except the gloves you do want to try to get attack speed on it in some capacity. And some useful bend crafts that you could do is % increased attack and cast speed while focused, increased damage with non-vol skills during soul gain prevention because you use vol haste, or at least you should. So when you press that button, it's like 6 seconds of like 60% increased damage. And if you're on Trickster, you can take advantage of the best one of all of these crafted mods, which is increased damage while leeching, because you just will always have that extra 43% increased damage. And then you can also just use the focused attack speed mod on that one. And the implicits that you're trying to get here are % damage increased with per 100 intelligence. And Rage on Hit is probably the best other implicit, but you could definitely also use Intimidate if your Mercenary doesn't have Intimidate, because that's a 10% increase or more damage modifier. Because you will always intimidate because you're hitting so many times a second. So the boots are exactly the same, except you just want movement speed. These ones you can be kind of like, if you're crafting it, like it's pretty easy to settle, right? Like if you hit like 30 movement speed and it has like 200 ES, you're happy. With int, you're happy, and that's not that hard to craft. It gets to a point where like if you wanted one that's like insanely high value, like it gets really expensive to craft because your prefixes, you can't have a third ES mod, since you have to have movement speed, right? So it gets weird. I like to use the implicits to get immunity to ailments really early on using Storm Shroud without a Mage Blood. You can get the Avoid Ailments Eater implicit for like 17%, I think, and then you can get the Shock Avoidance on Exarch implicit, which is like a 30-something%, and that gives you almost like half of your shock avoid, and then you can just like get one jewel that has 50% shock avoid on it, wear a Storm Shroud, and then you're ailment immune. You can also use CDR and travel skills, which is what I use now that I don't need the ailment avoid, and movement speed and action speed are the other good alternative, or the other good implicits for the Exarch. So I personally use movement speed. All right, so now we're on to the jewels. These are pretty important to spend time on and spend money on. First and most importantly are the cluster jewels. These cluster jewels are going to give you the majority of your damage from your skill tree is going to come from your cluster jewels. And ideally you want to have 2. Early on, you can have one of these cluster jewels, but then you should probably try to have a different large cluster jewel that's like attack damage with a shield, so you can get like some value out of like Veteran Defender and Feed the Fury or Fuel the Flight. Those are both like super value early on that solve like some of your character's problems. So you can skip having 2 of these, but you basically just want to get a 12 passive large cluster, and it needs to be at least item level 84 because you're looking for 35% increased effect. With tier 1 intelligence, and ideally all attributes in the suffixes, you can get away with not having that, but when you do, it's obviously just a lot better. And then don't even like really try not to care about the other prefix so much. Like you can see how this one has 16 to armor, that's completely irrelevant, but you know, if you get lucky, you could get max ES being the best one. You could get all resistances, make it a little easier to get your resistances capped. And also you can get like 4% increased damage, which is like 5 with the modifier. So I have one with increased damage on it. It's pretty value. But the most important is just, you know, getting the 35% and tier 1 int. It's like mandatory for these cluster jewels, so you need at least these. Watcher's Eyes that are good for us is Wrath. I mentioned this earlier. There's an increased lightning damage while affected by Wrath. There's also an increased crit chance while affected by Wrath. Then there's the one I use, % attack speed with precision. There's also % attack damage with precision. Something that could help a Deadeye with recovery would be ES on hit discipline. I'm thinking about getting one myself. Because it's just flat like 30 ES on hit and you're hitting so many times, right? So that will help with recovery a shit ton. And there's also just % chance to evade with Grace. You know, just nice, more evasion. And then for Trickster specifically, because you can actually worry about scaling spell suppression, because you have the room for it, you can also use a chance to suppress spell damage with Grace on your Watcher's Eye. So that's a really useful one for the Trickster specifically. Here are 3 insanely value intelligence stacking gems, or jewels. This first one is honestly kind of the best of these, which is really funny. I actually value this one more, like higher than these 2, easily. Just me personally. Because it gives you 80 intelligence from the tree plus the 24 from the jewel. So this is a 104 intelligence jewel, and it costs 1 chaos. So I advise putting this here. It's way too valuable. Yeah, like this basically is mandatory. Like you're not getting anything better than that. And then next important one here would be Emperor's Wit, because it's so cheap. Obviously Mastery is better, but it costs like 9 times the price. So there you go. There's nothing really to say about these. It's like you can see, they're just like percent attributes and stuff. But they're nice. I don't use Mastery. I actually just like don't really think I have room for it. I like the way my character is, so I'm not gonna like try to squeeze it in. Storm Shroud. I swear by this item. It's my favorite way to get ailment immune, especially with Mage's Blood, because you can just get that amazing avoid shock suffix, and just that is enough to be ailment immune. But obviously if you're on Trickster, you can also use an Ancestral Vision, which is doing the same thing, but it's scaling off of your spell suppression chance. Half of your spell suppression chance will turn into chance to avoid elemental ailments, and it can be pretty easy to get to 100%, especially if you have the crafts on the boots, where you have the avoid shock and you have the avoid ailment implicits, which I guess the shock wouldn't actually do anything because you're not wearing Storm Shroud. But yeah, you have the implicit, and there's also a boot essence that has that. So if you wanted to craft your boots with avoid ailments, you could use the essence that gives that. But yeah, Lethal Pride is a pretty valuable jewel to have. It's not as impressive as, you know, some people may think. At the very most, you're going to get 10% double damage out of it, which is good. Obviously, it's just 10% more damage, but you know, it's not like you need it. And then the only other two mods that would actually be good are reduced crit damage taken and chance for Endure to charge on kill. All the other modifiers are pretty much useless. I personally have 2 double damage mods and the crit reduction. And if you're looking for a price on this, it's hard to say with these things, but don't expect to pay more than 5 divines for one. This jewel is weird for this character, but essentially there's 3 different light of meanings that are good. Lightning damage, all attributes, and energy shield. Now the best of these 3 is actually all attributes. It just gives you a decent chunk of int, and it also, like, if you for some reason have stat problems for equipping some of your gems and stuff, then it will also solve that problem for you. The lightning damage one is obviously just like decent damage. It's just, I don't think it's better than all attributes. I think it's like the same, except all attributes is like giving you attributes, so that's better. And then if you really wanted to, you could do the energy shield light of meaning, but it says 83D here. It actually went up to 95. So it's, you know, feel free to do it. Sure, you can do it on Trickster. It's better on Trickster, right? So, you know. Rare jewels, pretty simple, you know. If you got room for rare jewels, you're just looking for int, ES, attack speed, crit multi. It's very basic stuff. Alright. Now into some miscellaneous stuff here. The flasks, which is probably the most important of these miscellaneous topics. Before you have a Mage Blood, your flasks should be a Quicksilver, a Silver, and a Jade. And then it's pretty much up to you between Quartz, Diamond, Sulfur, and Stibnite. I know that I used Quartz for most of my time because I just really value phasing. But if you just like want to have more damage, you can do the Diamond or the Sulfur. If you want more evasion, you can do Stibnite. You know, it's up to you. The unique flasks, Dying Sun is the GOAT. If anyone tries to tell you that Wine of the Prophet is better than Dying Sun, they're wrong. Don't listen to them. It's not. If you see people using it on PvE Ninja and you think, oh, everyone's using it, I should use it, don't. That item is like 60 divines, and it's not as good as Dying Sun. And Dying Sun, I think, is... Actually, I don't know the price of Dying Sun, but it's nowhere near that price. It's like 5D, maybe. Like, for a perfect roll, too. Wine of the Prophet, overrated, don't use it. If you have... I put Aureus End here because, yes, like, the Explode Flask is technically doing something for the character, but completely unnecessary. So basically, TLDR here, use Dying Sun. There's a reason it's in the center of the screen with a heart around it. It's just the GOAT flask. And once you have Mage Blood, it will be, once again, Quicksilver, Silver, Jade, and then you can pick between Bismuth and Quartz. You know, Quartz is a lot more appropriate on Trickster because you'll get that even more spell suppression to get to that capped spell suppression very early on. And my personal favorite of the suffixes are in order here, like the things that I value the most. Shock avoidance is number 1 because I always use Storm Shroud, so it's just like immediate ailment immunity. I really like that. Stun avoidance because you gotta have stun avoidance if you're playing CI. Everything will stun you if you don't have it. So curse effect reduction, which you don't need if you have the Edziri's reflection equipped. And then past that point, it's crit chance and evasion. These are both like equal weighting to me. It just depends on whether you want defense or you want offense. And currently, I am not using evasion and I'm using crit chance. So that was my choice on the build. All right, so let's talk about the Mercenary. Sorry for the clusterfuck that is this page, but I will just go by this stuff one by one. And I'll just read the note first up here. There are many ways to set up Doriani mercenaries. This is just my setup that I use. There is surely better ones out there. So here's my mercenary. And I'll go like left to right in order. There's 2 things I like about this mercenary. First thing being it has Wrath. And this Wrath is apparently level 20 Wrath because it does the same amount for my character as if I was using it. I was testing it, it did the exact same. And it also procs your Watcher's Eye mod. So while he's around and I have Wrath, which is always, I get the Watcher's Eye benefit of Wrath without actually having Wrath. So I like that. I think it just like is extremely efficient. And I'm a guy that loves efficiency when it comes to builds, so that's what I choose. And then also he has this tornado skill, which does work the same way as your tornado skill. You can hit it. And so every once in a while, he'll give you even more single target DPS by spawning a tornado. And of course, we're using Doriani tech. I probably don't even need to go over this, but I will anyway, which is just a body armor that nearby enemies have lightning resistance equal to yours. You see that here. It's the last modifier. It's the only one that matters. And then you just buy rings that have as much minus lightning res as you can get. These spawn from reflecting mists. They're kind of expensive to get because everyone's doing this. Like, I think these were both like 20 divine each, but this is a tremendous damage multiplier. You just need to use it. If you're not using it, you're just not playing correctly. You need this setup. You can see my guy's at minus 195. 200 is the max. So this is basically there. And then the staff he's wearing is just... I'll zoom in a bit if I can. I cannot. Okay. Well, I'll just read it. There's 3 modifiers on the staff that I like. Nearby enemies have 18% increased effect of curses on them. Now, that means Sniper's Mark. So that's 18% increased Sniper Mark effect. Nearby allies gain 18% increased damage. You just get 18% increased damage. Nice. 18% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. It's just scaling Wrath. So that's the weapon. Because he wears stabs, so this was like the best option. And then there's Calm's Binding, which I think is the second most important thing, like looking past the Doriani's, because, most characters have issues with physical mitigation, and this just makes enemies deal 25% of their phys as fire, so it just adds to your survivability. It feels really good. Actually, Perkle's Toe, I should have said, is the second most important item, because you get lucky damage with Hitch, which means it rolls your damage twice and picks the higher number. And because we're talking about the volatility setup where you have a really, really low maximum or minimum and a really, really high maximum, this makes your damage go up tremendously because it's giving you, it's like, you understand. You just get better rolls. And the helmet I'm using, you don't have to use this. Is a helmet that gives Ancestral Bond, which means that the mercenary cannot actually deal any damage. He can only deal damage with totems, so he doesn't deal any damage. And the reason I'm using that is because he was dying on Ally Reflect maps, because I can run them with Awaken Elemental damage with attacks, but he can't. And so I'm just like, well, screw that. He's just not going to deal damage, so he can just walk in with me. So that's why I have that there. I do recommend it because it just opens up that map mod for free. So yeah, that's the Mercenary again. Like, there's probably other setups out there that are better than this, but this is the one I've been using and it's working, so I don't care to switch. Now we're on to the Aspirational Gear. So I have on the left the realistic ones that you should be aiming for, and that you should be trying to get. And I already kind of went over this, but I'll just read this. I'll just read these just to make this easy. So Mage Blood's an item that you will really want to pick up as early as you can, because it removes so much pressure from your suffixes on your gear, which lets you get extremely efficient upgrades at a much lower cost. So this is just a build solving item and a build enabling item. And this build is kind of socket starved or suffix starved, right? Because you have to have intelligence on every item. So that's -1 suffix that you can have that's useful for your character on each piece of gear. So, you can just take that, extrapolate that or whatever into the rest of your character, and this item will solve all of your resistance issues, which just alleviates so much pressure on your suffixes being good. So you get so much more freedom. I mean, everyone probably knows this already about the item, but either way, it's currently 208 divine as of recording this video, and it's going to go up. It's been going up. It's just, classic. And then Nimbus. I actually think at this point, because Nimbus is dropping in price so drastically down to 36 div, I think that you should actually probably pick this up before Mage Blood. Matter of fact, I just think that's the correct decision. But this item is so efficient. I talked about it earlier, but it does something similar to Mage Blood, where it's solving a huge problem of the build, or it's providing it with something that wasn't necessarily a problem, but now it's you don't ever have to worry about it again, which is the single target. I think it really does, this paired with the Mercenary tech really solves your single target, and so that's really good. And you get a free jewel or skill support gem slot on your Kinetic Blast, letting you use crit multi, which is a huge damage boost. And then we have the chase items. These are the items that you definitely really, well, at least in the case of the Simplex, you definitely really want this. It's just the best in slot amulet. It is tremendous for scaling intelligence, and the increased damage per 15 int does a tremendous amount of job scaling your damage as well. And you've probably seen this and you probably know it, but yes, it is also 400 divine. You can craft it yourself. You buy the base for 200, and you basically just have to hope that you craft the amulet within the 200 divine budget, which I did not. I tried to craft it, and it took over 200 divines to get nothing. So I ended up selling that Simplex and just buying one that was crafted. So I do think you should try to get the item, though. It kind of makes the build feel, it's a similar amount of power gain to Mage Blood. So, and then there's the light meeting with Energy Shield. I talked about this earlier. It is an extremely expensive upgrade that I don't condone necessarily, but you could do it if you wanted to. I do not think it's worth 95 divines, which the price is going up, so it'll be even more soon. And then it's even less worth it, but technically an option. Here is the absolute aspirational item of the build. And before I talk about this one, I also want to mention there is other aspirational pieces of rare gear and things like that I'm not even going to bother covering, because I don't know the best way to approach those pieces of gear right now, because there's just some new tech that I haven't fully been able to flesh out with the new Bound by Destiny jewel. So I'm just going to leave that to the side for now, and if I end up finding some stuff out about certain chase items with influences and whatnot, then I will make a follow-up to this basically and just go through those options. But for now, I'm going to leave it out. So this is a wand I bought today, or I mirrored today. I did a mirror service because I happened to drop a mirror today. I was about 250 D in on my grind to get to this amulet, and I just happened to drop a mirror, which that was awesome. I didn't expect that. So I just earlier today went and swapped this out. I swapped my wand with this one, and it over doubled my DPS, and that's why I'm at the 1 million mark, or 1 billion mark for single target DPS. I was somewhere around 400 million, and this wand made that big of a difference. It added 600 million DPS to my character. This is as aspirational as it gets for the character. You're paying a mirror plus a 100 divine fee. By the way, if you want this guy's wand, if you want to do this, just look up the Echo Mirror Shop on Google. It'll take you to his website. I did the trade earlier. He's not going to scam you. He'll do it, and you just have to pay him 100 D. So, just feel free to drool at this item. Once you started playing the build and you put this thing into your POB, you're gonna dream about this item. It's just so incredible. This is my first mirror weapon I've ever had. I never really thought it was worth doing, but because I dropped that mirror earlier, I'm like, all right, well, screw it. And then there's just a couple little notes I want to touch on. I've been getting some comments about map mods and which ones suck to run, and so I'll just discuss what to do here. There's only 4 mods that are actually a concern. First being Elemental Reflect, but obviously you can just use Awakened Elemental damage with attacks at level 5 to be immune to LA Reflect for KB. Just be careful not to Frostblink into a pack of monsters, you'll still die. Physical Reflect. You can unspec, I think it's, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 points from your tree at some point, and you can spec this wheel here, and you take the Mastery, which is reduced physical reflected damage taken, I think 60%, yeah. And then you take the Soul of Yugal Pantheon, which gives you another 50%, which makes you physical immune to reflect. So that's how you do it. And then whenever you're done doing the content that you rolled that had that, you just, spec your points back up into the stuff you had before. For monsters, block 2 or chance to block damage, and the reason this one's a big problem is because yes, it's a 50%, and you should be able to kill them with 50%. But once you're scaling map effect, it goes up to like 90%, right? So that's 90% less damage you're dealing. So basically, you do the same thing as this. It takes 1 more point, so it's going to take 6. But you grab this dex node, then you grab this whole wheel, and this wheel is not useless like this one is, because you do get 1 extra proj and some attack speed, so it's actually not like useless. And then you just take the monsters cannot block your attacks mastery, and then again, when you're done with that content, you can just respec to what you were before. And monsters can't be leached from, don't run it. You just can't. So there you go, GG. Can't run that mod. That's the only one that you can't run. I've thought about it a lot. I just don't think there's a way around it. I think it's just impossible to run that. So just don't. And that is actually everything I have for this deep dive. If there's things that I missed, and if there's like any kind of content that you would like to see coming up, I wonder if I can just like go to the beginning of it. Yeah, if there's anything else you want to see, or any information that you want, feel free to ask. I do try to reply to every question that I have in the comments, and I would be glad to make more content around this build. If you guys want to see what it looks like with the mirror wand and whatnot, I should be uploading just a couple map showcases and boss showcases soon, just to sort of go hand in hand with this video, so I don't make it too long by including gameplay as well. I really appreciate everyone who's coming around for these pieces of content I'm making. I hope you're satisfied with the information I'm giving you here. And yeah, again, I said it in my last video, I'll say it again. I'm always happy to see more Kinetic Blast and Stack enthusiasts coming around, because it is my favorite build, and it's just really nice to have some people around playing it. So thank you.